It had been a great flight with a great entry and landing, and the team was preparing to hand over the vehicle to the KSC ground folks. One of the last orders of business in this process is to transition from internal vehicle cooling to ground cooling. Now in orbit, cooling is accomplished through a combination of the radiators and flash evaporator system. As shuttle equipment heats up, the Freon loops and water loops carry this heat to the flash evaporator and radiators to be dispersed into space. For entry, the radiators are cold soaked and then bypassed so that cooling can be used on the ground. Then post-landing, the shuttle uses its cold-soaked radiators for a few minutes, and then as they heat up, the team activates the ammonia system, which flashes ammonia onto the Freon loops to provide cooling. In order to have a safe transition to ground cooling, the ammonia system has to be deactivated and confirmed to have no leaks, and then a go is given so that the ground team can activate ground cooling. At least that's the way it's supposed to go. Now there are some critical elements to consider regarding cooling. Obviously, you have to keep cooling going so nothing overheats, but at the same time, you can't get too cold or you could freeze the interchanger. The interchanger is the heat exchanger where the water loops dump the cabin heat onto the Freon loops. All the shuttle cooling loops meet there. And since we're dealing with water, we can't let it get below 32 degrees Fahrenheit or the water loops could freeze. And as you know, when water freezes, it expands. And crack, you've just ruptured a piece of equipment that could cost over $1 million to replace. This is a very efficient heat exchanger, so this would only take a matter of seconds. On STS-27, the ECOM team was faced with just this scenario.
Going prompt, are you okay?
Okay, flight.
No problem, flight. ECOM?
And we're still waiting to see the ground cooling flow.
Okay, DPS?
We're ready to go.
Intel?
We're ready for it. We're ready to hand it over.
Booster?
It's post-landing, and everything's going normally. You're on the ground. You've made it, right? What could go wrong here? The team is even starting the post-landing tradition of hanging the plaque, in which one of the flight controllers is honored with special recognition. However, not everything is done. Handover to ground cooling hasn't been completed, and the ECOM team is watching ammonia performance as suddenly the Freon loop temperatures start diving. So why don't you tell me first of all, so we got Quinn Kerlock and Chuck Dingle for STS-27. Why don't you tell me your positions for this flight and what the responsibilities of those positions were. So start with the leader, Chuck, of the team.
Okay, so it's been a while, but I think I was asked an entry in Orbit 1 ECOM for the flight, so we were responsible for the life support, thermal control, and also at that time the electrical power systems on board.
Okay, and Quinn?
I was the acid entry thermal and specifically responsible for the active cooling and passive cooling systems on the shuttle, including the ammonia boiler, Freon, and water loops primarily.
Convoy Commander, this is Houston Flight on the command net.
ECOM thermal.
Yes, sir, we're estimating about
I was not watching what exactly happened, but we had an Undertemp switchover on System D.
Okay, so what were you looking at there that cued you into the fact, hey, I got a problem going on here? Was that bell that went off, the alarm that went off earlier probably?
Actually, what happened was, the first thing I saw was we have an indication on the ammonia system, the primary controller, if something goes wrong with the logic or goes under temp, it automatically switches to the secondary controller, trying to go to a different controller to control the system. That was the first insight, as I saw, as this indication that we just switched from the primary controller to the secondary controller. It generally means under temp. And that was the only indication at the time, was seeing the switch. And having said that, that's upstream into the evap out T-deucers, so the temperatures hadn't arrived at.
Yeah. How many seconds is that from ammonia to?
I forgot. You probably,
I do know. Yeah, it's about 45 seconds or so.
Okay.
Yeah. So you guys knew something switched over, but you probably didn't have an idea at that point it was an under temp, right?
Right.
Okay. Okay. And I think he may have just called, hey, I think you called it under temp switchover maybe.
Right.
Okay, let's see what.
If you're ready to take it.
33.3, 32.8. You better get a call here when we're ready to initiate flow. We'll momentarily. We'll call you right back.
31.2, you're in the red.
Are you ready to take the vehicle?
You want the yard or turn off the ammonia system. Wait, hang on. We've got
Now the team has confirmed there's an under temp problem. The cold slug has now shown up on the downstream temperature reducers, and the extra cold Freon is racing towards the interchanger, which could crack if faced with these temperatures.
How long does the team have to respond? What is the correct course of action to take?
Okay, so at this point you know that you've got the evap out T low, and what are you thinking?
What am I thinking at the time? There was a hairy edge where, you know, I knew that it maybe initiated ground cooling. There was some speck leakage to the ammonia boiler, that it leaks ammonia. So you're getting some cooling from it, whether it's on or when it's on, no matter what, if it's not required or not. So it's providing extra cooling to the loop. Initial thought was, okay, we're down, just broke 32 degrees. Maybe they're having the cooling cards adjusted real low. Am I ready to take this drastic action yet, or is this maybe we can take the ammonia boiler off and that would be sufficient to bring it above freezing again, was my initial thoughts. It was not, I was getting pretty excited, as you can hear, was the fact that, you know, we were actually below the freezing point of the water, and we needed to do something quick. And so that was the initial reaction, just get it off and see if that will bring the temperature back up above freezing.
So what is the issue here with getting too cold? What's the problem with doing that?
It's your turn to talk, Chuck.
Well, the interchanger is a very efficient heat exchanger, and it's got Freon on one side and water on the other. And if you put in Freon below 32 degrees in pretty short order, you're going to end up freezing water. Turn the water into ice, it expands, and volume changing the heat exchanger can break the heat exchanger.
Gotcha. That'd be pretty expensive to try to replace that.
Yes.
And one of the big things was that we have done that before in STS-3. There were some data points. The big thing is, I don't think they have any spares. And I think that the big thing is it just puts not only the costs, which they estimate over $1 million, but getting a new one and installing it, and the downtime of the vehicle was a big impact.
So impact to schedule would have been pretty enormous, huh?
Right. I mean, basically you can't power up the vehicle with the Freon loops or water loops are not active.
So knowing that, why didn't you just go take the drastic? What is drastic about turning the Freon loops off? Why don't you just say, let's go ahead and turn them off? What's the issue there? You know, so we got on one side, we don't want to freeze the interchanger. Why don't we want to just turn the Freon loops off? What's the issue there?
Well, I mean, to me it was a big deal. And it hadn't hit that threshold. I kind of had my line of sand. If it gets below 30 degrees, that's when my line of my sand we're not playing anymore. And as you're going to hear in a little bit, it happened fairly quickly from drop down, and it was very obvious that once it got to off-scale low of the deucer, which was 24.9, you'll hear that several times repeated.
Off-scale low?
Yeah, it was off-scale low.
Yeah.
It was very obvious what we needed to do. But it was, to me, it was a drastic. I mean, the fact that we could potentially shut it down, we may not bring it back up, or we may do something wrong where we lose some science because we lose cooling to the vehicle. And I don't know, that's a DOD flight, I don't know if this is, but.
Right, that's okay. So basically you turn off the Freon loops, you're losing cooling to the vehicle.
Right. The potential of emergency power down, and as you hear later, at one point I didn't care. Chuck was being the brave person. Let's get it back up. I was like, shut it down.
Just forget it. Yeah. Okay. Play a little bit more.
Quanticom, deactivate ammonia system.
Everybody stand by just a minute. We're going to wait.
Quanticom,
Go ahead.
ammonia system beat off. We're under temping.
Capcom ammonia system beat off. We're under
Decom thermal.
Go.
I have a call. Deactivate both Freon loops ASAP.
Go ahead, Quanticom.
We'd like you to take the ammonia to off.
Activated cooling.
Quanticom.
Dead.
Both Freon loops are off.
Capcom, both Freon loops to off.
Atlantis, we'd like both Freon loops to off.
Okay, ammonia boiler B just went off. Okay, flight copy that. NCC on command.
You're at 24.9 and 24.9.
So it sounds like nothing, you made the call for the Freon loops, nothing happened, right?
Initially, and I'm still not clear. You know, they're actually the control team was basically in the, like I said, the post-mission mode where they're doing the post-black hanging and stuff. And I think even GC got to the point where actually temporarily they shut down comm between the vehicles. What I heard later for their first initial call to the vehicle to turn off both Freon loops. And I don't think they ever left the house.
They're probably thinking the rule, the 1.1, hey, the crew's gone. Why should I keep comm up? I mean, we're already doing the plaque hanging.
Right.
Let's just shut this thing down. So, okay.
Yeah, I don't know what all the factors were in that. Listening to that recording, which I don't think I've ever listened to, probably wanted to block all that out. But just being kind of stepping back as an observer to myself, if I would have had the wherewithal, I think it would have helped to be more exact in the call, especially knowing that the flight crew was not in there, who probably could have responded very well to deactivate both Freon loops, with a support person in there instead, a more precise call like on panel L1, Freon pump loop 1 to off and loop 2 to off. I think that in hindsight would have helped get that done much faster. If I was a ASP in the cockpit trying to interpret that call, I would probably have trouble myself.
Right,
So.
you're an MS1 who hasn't simmed in a year. Where are those switches?
Right.
Yeah, that's good. That's a very good point. That's a good point.
Okay, I've got the ammonia controller turned off. On the Ecom,
Have turnover anytime you're formally come?
Joey come.
Yeah, you want to go to interchanger? Or
I wanted at least one off.
okay.
So what was going on there? We made the call for the Freon loops, and now Quinn's calling again. Let's get one off.
Yeah, so I can tell you from my perspective, I was trying to find the procedure for VAP out temp low, I think in the entry checklist.
Right.
Okay, so I was
5-6,
thumbing
I
through the
believe.
book to try and find that procedure to save myself. And so after making the call to turn both Freon loops off, I think I was under the assumption that that would happen quickly.
Right.
I'm going to find the procedure to look for subsequent steps to guide us, and so Quinn called, and I'm asking questions, I think, out of that procedure, and Quinn says, hey, I just please turn at least one off. So it hit me at that point, oh, they didn't respond to the call.
Right, and you and Quinn can't see each other here, right? One's in one room, one's in the other room. So, and sometimes there's over the airwave conversation that goes on, and so you didn't know why they weren't turning the Freon loops off, right?
And I tell you from as a mid perspective, one thing it really taught me was, okay, I've already made the call. I'm watching. Chuck is watching this data too. Don't need to bother. He sees what's happening. I'm kind of in the back room dancing, panicking, cussing.
Yeah.
Say, get the loop off. But I am not. I learned after the fact that when he started talking about what he wanted to do next, it would put a fear through me that he doesn't realize they're still not off yet. And then I'm questioning why didn't they go off? Why didn't they actually do it? But the point lesson for future guys is, don't make assumptions that your figures. Look at the data. This is all Vox, so it's happening much quicker than it really is. But we had, I want to say, correct me if I'm wrong, 60 to 90 seconds somewhere before we would have damaged the interchanger.
It's another 45. VAP out to interchange, another 45.
And we're ticking along. It's 20 seconds, 30 seconds, and
Right.
I should have been going, hey, Chuck, we're still not off. I should have been more proactive. I made the assumption that he's looking at the data, he's seeing it too, he's cognizant, and it put the fear of God to me when he realized he made a call like, what are we going to do next? And I'm realizing he's not looking at the data, and I'm realizing I should have been giving him
Pushing it.
Well, I certainly should have been paying attention to get the primary action to ensure that it was done.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the things that I wish I had done better
Right.
back at the time, was to be more cognizant of making sure that they took the action that we asked.
It's taking too much. It was my job to watch the systems, so I should have kept him
It's a
informed.
team effort both ways.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
It's a team effort all the way around, good and bad. We work as a team.
Flight com, let's turn both Freon loops off.
Capcom, both Freon loops off.
Linus for the ASP, we'd like both Freon loops to off.
Ecom, what's happening to you?
We're under temp.
Sound like it's getting a little stressed out there.
Yeah, I think the seriousness of it was probably starting to soak in.
Yeah, you probably, I'm just guessing, you just realized I made a call and I'm looking at the procedures and my call didn't go up, and now I'm realizing I need to push this thing a little harder. I'm guessing.
Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah, still, I think the lesson to be learned there was give a more exact call.
Yeah.
And you're more likely to get a quick response.
So for you to call, because like you said, there's no panel there, it's just the pumps, and if it was an ASP, they might be looking.
He's looking, yeah, what is that?
MO10W or something. Is this on the mid deck? You know, yeah. That's good.
Gentlemen, okay, the free on loop 1 and loop 2 are both off. We copy.
We see both Freon loops off now.
Fahrenheit, you got it.
Okay, what are you going to want to do now?
Okay, the Freon loops are off. The cold slug is stopped, but it's still sitting there, a silent menace ready to wreak havoc. The team knows this, but how does the team keep the interchanger from cracking and still reestablish cooling? Now how much time do they have?
So you got both Freon loops off, and you know that's a drastic action. How long could the Freon loops be off? And how do you gauge that? 'Cause it's a big deal to having the Freon loops off. Are you starting another timer? Because you were starting your interchanger freeze timer. It's like, I know I got so much time before that cold slug hits. Now I've turned the Freon loops off. You got another timer going now?
I didn't have a time. I didn't have a timer. I had the general knowledge that things don't melt down instantly.
Right.
To me, probably the fuel cells are of the biggest concern, and I know that, you know, for fuel cells, what we could go for loss of coolant pumps on fuel cells, we could go like 9 minutes or thereabouts.
Right.
So yeah, I think you have probably at least that order of magnitude before something, you know, catastrophic happens.
Okay.
So clearly, I think you have not a lot of time, but an order of magnitude more time to deal with them being off than to deal with the cold slug coming around.
Right. Okay. Is that kind of what? Did you have a clock going in your mind at all?
Well, the good thing is we had the EPS guys, and the fuel cells I knew was the short pole. We had the EPS guy watching the fuel cells right across there, and he would be the one to make the recommendation whether we have to terminate the basically a power down of the vehicle if we couldn't regain it. So.
Now let me ask you this: had you guys simmed this case basically prior to this?
No. Go ahead.
I don't remember us having done that.
Not really. And the other thing, even when they did start simulating this, doing a sims of this later after this event for future teams, one of the things about the post landing was always very stressful for me is you can't recreate in training all the noises, the ground convoys, the confusion of the additional loops, the communication that's going, all the loops you're listening to. It was very noisy. It was always a very stressful time for me when I became an ecom doing acid entry, was because we didn't train it, and there were just not only that, even afterwards was just the chaos. Everyone was getting done with their job in the control center. It was noisy in the control center. It was noisy on the loops, and you had this unknown factor we don't train with, which is the KSC guys. Very often that we did start using direct comm with the guys, trying to minimize any kind of problems. We could directly talk to the guys at the convoy, but no, it was the training was we sat down and walked through this procedure. And there was also a lot of lessons learned, like I said, from STS3 with things that they had done after we handed over. They did some additional ammonia boiler tests that they undertemp, and there was some lessons learned from it. And the fact that that happened there made me very cognizant. If it happened once, it could happen again.
Yeah, I think I just can't emphasize enough the few minutes of time that we took preparing and walking through that was just enormous help. I think it's as much better as I could have done in that situation, and I certainly wish that I had. I think I could have done a lot worse had we not done that preparation, because turning off both Freon loops is you want to do what?
Right, right.
So
you want to turn off all the cooling of the vehicle?
Yeah, the fact that we had talked through it, at least it resonated with me that, yeah, that's what we have to do. We talked through that. We talked about the urgency of time and how that has to be done to preserve that heat exchanger. So that I at least never questioned that aspect of it. Had we not talked through that case, as deep a respect as I have for Quinn and knew that I had the best thermal guy in the back room, I don't think I would have just said, okay, whatever you say. I think I would have at least questioned it some,
Right.
and that might have made the difference in the case. So that preparation we did was just worth it, invaluable.
Now, was that SOP for you? Like if you had an event coming up that you would talk to the back room and say, hey, this is the things that could go wrong, this is what we're going to do. Was that just SOP, or you just kind of got lucky that time that you did that?
You know, I really don't know. It's probably SOP when you feel like you don't know as much as you should know about something. And again, coming from the electrical side of the house and trying to pick up the thermal and life support stuff, you don't pick up all the knowledge you need in a matter of a couple of years, which is probably as long as I had been thinking about it.
Right.
So it's many years of preparation to really understand those systems. So to me, it was basically all that I could do personally in limited time in order to be the most prepared that I could.
Yeah.
So had I had 5 or 10 years experience in that, I might have been more complacent and not felt the need to do that. But I did it out of a personal need to cover myself.
Right, right, gotcha. Excellent. Let's keep going here. So we got that right now, the Freon loops are off.
Stand by. We're going to exercise the procedure on page 5-6, entry checklist. Formally come. So we come. Okay, you want to take Freon loop 1 to A, wait 1 minute, then go 2 to A? That's correct. Okay.
Now, is that something, sounds like you talked about this previously, so had you already stepped kind of through the recovery of the,
Yes,
of the
actually,
scenario as well?
When we went the orbit time frame, we actually went through all the contingency aspects, the recovery steps, and kind of walking through it. It was really, so we kind of do the plan that we're going to do. Like again, I was at the point, I would have been happy to said it's to an emergency contact, we're done with it. At that point, like what I said, let's get this vehicle back ready in a good config to hand over. So
I don't remember, were those steps in the entry checklist about T-low to reactivate like that?
yes,
They
they
were.
did. They were.
Okay, that's good. And so it sounds like you're doing one loop at a time. Why don't you just turn them, you know, the undertemps, we've stopped it, let's go ahead and turn them both on. Why did you do it that way instead of one loop at a time?
Oh, it was actually part of the procedure, but the real reason is you're only activating one, so half the, I don't want to say, you're only dealing with half the cold slug at a time. And the vehicle's being hot right now, the water loops have gotten, the interchanger's been hot since it's been running without any cooling, so we're trying to introduce one loop, look it over, only add one of the cold slugs at a time, and then evaluate how the system is working. So
You get the insight into the situation, whether or not your undertemp situation is basically remedied or not. With you could look at it as half the risk, half the heat rejection capability of the heat exchanger.
And I wasn't paying attention. Did y'all were you picking the Freon loop that was associated with the ammonia system? I wasn't paying attention to that.
actually, both of the loops were off at the time. So
I mean, to turn it back, oh, you mean both ammonia systems were already off, it didn't matter.
Right.
Okay, that's right. Okay, gotcha.
Did we have an additional measurement on one loop over the other?
Yeah, you had an interchanger in on loop 1.
Okay.
Yeah, so I don't know if that's why you might have picked that one first.
okay.
I just did what he said.
Well, we'll listen ahead a little bit. Chuck does good.
Okay. And I can't remember now. Have you already gone flow proportioning valve to payload at this point? I can't remember.
Actually, believe it or not, the old procedure was go to interchanger. The assumption was the payload loop was going to be the slower flowing loop. So the procedure was written generically, always go to interchanger.
Oh.
It's been changed since then.
Oh, right. So if you had a payload, you would freeze that payload's water loop if it was there.
Quicker than.
Gotcha. Okay.
I'd like to wait a couple more minutes before activating loop 2. 1, okay. So take Freon loop 1 to A at this time? That is correct.
You want to do the procedure on 5-6?
That's a firm flight. We can take Freon loop 1 to pump A right now.
Okay, Capcom, we'd like to go to 5-6.
Yes, water loop 1.
Yeah, that's firm.
Is that you guys?
Yeah,
Water
we'd
loop
like
1
you
is
to
on.
go to page 5-6.
Entry checklist.
Did you say
Yes,
water loop
I'm
was
watching
off?
fuel cells.
Start.
Did I catch that right? Y'all didn't turn a water loop off. They must have said it wrong.
He may have said on.
Oh, maybe it was on.
Yeah.
Anyways, well,
And one of the points too is that, and when you listen to this loop, it's amazing to me after listening to this thing how I knew exactly what I wanted to do, but I was under the stress and I don't know the word panic, but under the stress.
right.
He never panicked.
It's
you didn't
amazing.
sound like panic.
I was having trouble
Right.
communicating exactly. I was having trouble between loop 1 and loop 2 and what pump I was feeling to communicate. Chuck did an excellent job of, okay, I heard what you said. Is this really what you wanted? What were you saying? And it was very easy to go back and say, yes, that's what I meant to say. But it was amazing how the simple things like loop 1 and loop 2, even though I had the procedure over, I was saying the wrong thing just to the stress.
And I think Chuck said you got yourself out of the quick response situation by turning the free loops off. Now you had kind of an order of magnitude more, so you could slow down a little bit, right?
A little, yeah.
Not, yeah, not a lot. You got the fuel cells out there heating up,
Right.
but yeah, you're able to slow down a little. So does that go through your mind? Okay, I can take a little bit more time, make sure I'm understanding the call instead of just pedal to the metal. Is that in your mind as you're?
I think it
Going
was
through
in
this?
mine, yeah.
I know it's a ways back.
It was,
yeah, a lot of.
it was, what was going through my mind.
Am I Freon pump loop 1 to A?
That's firm flight.
And Capcom, we want him to start with Freon pump loop 1 to Alpha. You want him to press on through the procedure, is that right?
Were they supposed to? Let's start out with Freon loop 1 to A and look it over.
Okay. Capcom, all we want is Freon loop 1.
Thermal econ. Econ. Yeah, is that what you want? Freon loop 1 to A and watch it for a minute?
Yes, sir. And then we'll make the call to turn back loop 1, phase 2.
Okay.
Both Freon loops are down. That's complete, and we got other steps to read them to me. The entry checklist is not available.
We will do that.
Shooter on AC looks
You
good.
just said that. Did you just say entry checklist is not available now? I think I just heard that. I'd never heard that before until you mentioned the FDF's not there. So yeah, I never put that together before.
Flight econ Freon loop 1 is running again.
Okay.
Okay, they're back up now on loop 1. Dennis, they're back up on
And I
loop 1.
think, Ecom, are you noticing any ground cooling now?
2's still down. We'll let you know when we see the flow on it.
I can't answer that right now.
Convoy Commander, Houston flight on the convoy.
APS.
Go.
Okay, fuel cell 3 coolant return temp is skyrocketing there.
Yes, sir. Would you confirm we have an issue?
3 kilowatts, we cannot go like this.
Okay, we just got Freon loop 1 back on.
Okay, expect it to reverse.
Go ahead, Tom, let me know when you're happy with the configuration. We won't leave it until you are.
Roger that, flight.
Loop 1 Freon is up. Loop 1 Freon is up.
At that point, you had one Freon loop up, and I heard the EPS, that was Minter, right? Wasn't that Larry Minter back there? Saying the fuel cell return temp's starting to skyrocket. At that point, with one Freon loop up, were y'all feeling pretty good about yourselves, or did you need to keep going, get both loops up to, get yourself in a really good config? Or what was your clock like, or what was your thinking
I
once
was
you got the
feeling
first
good.
once you got
We're not
one up?
overtipping anymore. We got one loop up. I was feeling pretty good at that point.
Okay.
Me too.
That's good. So you're starting to get over the hump here. Gotcha.
It went from me dancing to seeing Larry start dancing. When the fuel cell tips going
It's
up.
not a dance of joy either, right? Gotcha.
Karen, what is the evap out at this time? Okay, evap out
Thermal econ.
is 42.5.
You think we undertemp due to ground cooling?
Initiating ground cooling without deactivating the ammonia system, and evidently it cranked it down rather rapidly.
Roger.
So I know you just said it there, but just to put it out there. So at that point, what was the problem? And how did this whole thing kind of evolve?
Chuck, maybe you can remember better. I thought they did a new system. I mean, they did a new procedure on the cooling cart where they recirc fluid. I believe is that.
This sounds
They
familiar.
recirculated the fluid in the cooling cart. It would allow this cold slug to build up.
Okay.
And so when they initiated, they got this really cold slug to occur. And I think that was it. But there was a new procedure they implemented for 27, and I think they changed it back after 27 to kind of more of a standard procedure they had
Now,
been doing.
was it back then? Was it standard to have the ammonia and the ground cooling, but at the same time? Because they both came up at the same time, right? You had ammonia and they hooked up. Was that standard back then?
Normally, they would notify us ahead of time that they're ready to initiate. At that point, we would make the call to deactivate the ammonia, and then they would initiate. In this case, they initiated. I don't know if it was because it's the new procedure. Had this cold slug when they initiated it up, but we were not notified that they were about to initiate it. And there was some pressure that they knew that we were getting near the end of our second ammonia tank.
Right.
And they had
they're feeling a schedule crunch there.
To get
schedule pressure.
To get that initiated. So I think that they got in a hurry and they initiated without going to the normal procedure. They contact and say we're about to initiate.
Wow. So there's another piece of an error change. You got some guys on the other end are feeling some schedule pressure. You got some procedures that weren't synced up, some comm that wasn't synced up. People starting to get distracted with the plaque hanging. There was a lot of variables going on in there.
You captured that really well.
Well, thank you. I didn't realize that all that was going on, and even listening to the recording, I didn't realize you guys had obstacles out in front of you didn't know about, right? Yeah. That's really good.
And hindsight's always 20/20. I wish that I would have done more coordination with the people on the KSC end to have a better handoff, and I think we did improve on that a lot after that event.
Right. We'll see what else we got here.
TC's on reversing. I hope it comes on down. QSR3 is under 4 kilowatts.
Yeah, we'll be okay.
It shouldn't be above 110 on that return.
So it sounds like the EPS is freaking out a little bit, but you know it's going to get better here, right?
I don't know if it was out of ignorance or not, but I was less concerned about it than Larry was at the time.
Yeah. And you knew you had one fan loop up, so you knew you had some cooling. You remember what the KW was about that time?
I think he was saying about 4.
Probably on that
for fuel cell.
For that fuel cell.
Right.
Okay. So if they're evens, probably about 12 or so, right?
Yeah.
So one fan loop should be able to handle 12 pretty well. Okay.
Never mind. It appears everything's back to nominal. We're go for Freon cooling with 2 back on.
Okay. Hey, did you not ammonia off? Go with his
Okay, so this is ground cooling.
This is ground cooling. So by activating this one system, it will not cause undertemp.
Cleared over here to the central entry.
Mighty come.
Go ahead.
Okay, we see good ground cooling on Freon Loop 1. Now we'll go to, I think, Freon Loop 2 to pump A.
Okay, this is okay. Capcom, we'd like Freon Loop 2 to pump A.
Linus, Houston, we'd like you to take Freon Pump Loop 2 to Alpha. Roger, that's complete. Copy.
Sounds like you're done.
Yeah.
So as quickly as it came, it almost subsided and forget all about you, right?
Yeah, like Quinn said, that since that was the Vox, I think the pain lasted a little bit longer.
Yeah. This is the Voxed. This is what we got, about 9.5 minutes there. So unvoxed, how long do you think the situation really went? About double that, maybe, or do y'all recall?
That's probably good.
Yeah. Right. Well, that's excellent. Any other summary thoughts about the situation? I know you gave a lot of hindsight while we were going, but any other thoughts about the situation?
I guess just some of the things that came from this mission. I mean, like we talked about, Flight Rule 1-1 got changed. We started to train post-landing. We spent a lot of time with the KSC folks trying to establish better protocols and communication between the ECOM and the ground convoy guys. We improved the evac low procedure. We became a lot of improvements on it and how to go through it. What else did we improve?
You reminded me of stuff I had long
but there was a lot of improvements on how, and the communications with the flight director, stressing with them that, hey, look, the vehicle, here's what undertemp occurs, this is why we're so scared of it. Yeah. And the flight director's done a lot better job post-landing to make sure the team is cognizant, hey, we ain't handing over until keep the room quiet until the ground crew is established and the crew's out. So
Sometimes, even when the mission's seemingly over, it may not be over. In the midst of distraction, the ECOM team identified the undertemp situation, diagnosed the cause of 2 cooling systems running simultaneously, then resolved the situation while preserving crew safety and all vehicle hardware. The MCC flight controller is one who must always be aware that suddenly and unexpectedly we may find ourselves in a role where our performance has ultimate consequences. Discipline, competence, confidence, responsibility, toughness, teamwork, and vigilance. These are our core values, values that have served us well, values that have allowed us to slip the surly bonds of earth and perform our dance above the skies.